All right, a special edition here on XFL Chalk Talk. We're extremely excited to be joined by, in my opinion, the best in the biz when it comes to covering the XFL and XFL news. Mike Mitchell, he writes for XFL Board, XFL News Hub. And what I think is the coolest thing about you, Mike, is that you're one of the OGs. You're one of the original gangsters when it comes to the XFL, because you, along with maybe a couple other people, not only are you covering this version of the XFL, but correct me if I'm wrong, you were around in 2001 covering the New York team, weren't you?
That is correct. Yes, I can't believe I've been around that long. There are people who are following the XFL right now who weren't even born when the original XFL existed. So I thank you, by the way. I don't know if I'm going to be able to live up to that intro, Riley. Thanks.
Well, how old were you, Mike, when you first worked in 2001? I'm calling you. I'm trying to figure out your age here, man.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here we go. So I'm 43. I'm 43. So whatever. Math is not my strong suit, but that's pretty pathetic if I don't remember 19 years ago. I guess I was 24 back then. So that was kind of the story there. It was a unique experience. Basically, XFLboard.com was a fan site, and kind of like what Reddit is today. And it was a message board for fans. And we fortunately got lucky, and the league was friendly to us, and they gave us press credentials, and we were able to, go to the games, which was a hell of an experience. And it was a lot of fun. I love the league for all its warts. It was fun. So.
That's cool. We appreciate you taking the time. You guys do a great job at XFL Board. You write a lot of different articles covering the XFL, but your expertise is really in the New York Guardians. So we're going to start there. And obviously the big news recently is Luis Perez being traded from the Wildcats. He's obviously the first allocated quarterback to be on the move. So, Mike, tell us what's going on. What do you make of Luis Perez being sent to the Guardians? What does this mean for the Guardians? Obviously, it's too late into training camp for him to compete for the starting spot, but what do you make of Luis Perez being shipped to the New York Guardians?
I think the Guardians front office has a few different members who are in the Alliance of American Football who have a high opinion of Luis Perez, and that's why they traded for him. But I think the short-term goal is for him to be a backup initially, and then we'll see where it goes from there. It's a fall from grace for Luis Perez, who looked like the poster boy of the Wildcats at one moment, and now is a backup. He's going to have to earn his keep. It's kind of a little bit of a humbling experience for him. I think Perez does have a good skill set. The problem with him is consistency. He's a raw talent, and accuracy was an issue with him. And I think a lot of that has to do with lack of starting experience on the pro level. We saw with the Iron, I'm sure you guys watched him there with Birmingham. He had his moments where he looked spectacular, and he had his moments where he just did not look very good.
Well, let's stick on New York quarterbacks and bring up Matt McGloin. Mike, what have you heard in camp regarding kind of his command of the offense, and what do we expect from Matt McGloin this year for the Guardians?
The staff loves him. His teammates love him. He's a good leader. So there's been some inconsistency with the offense during camp. A lot of that has to do with the pieces surrounding him. So there's been a lot of changes, the wide receiver position, the offensive line. So there's been some inconsistency there, and Kevin Gilbride's been kind of disappointed with some aspects, but I think they improved towards the tail end of camp. And I think the team is happy with McGloin. I think the trade for Perez is not an indictment on him, so to speak, but I think it's almost like an insurance policy just in case.
Hey, Mike, what do you make of Coach Gilbride's comments in regards to his team? He seems to be very critical of his team early on. And do you foresee him or the Guardians having a slow start to the season?
I think it's possible, but I also think Gilbride has been around for so long that he's always going to harp on the negatives that he sees, the things that he sees that are troubling him. And so he's a very honest guy. So he's very straightforward, very honest. He's also trying to send a message to his team. So I wouldn't look at his comments as a sign that the Guardians are going to get off to a slow start per se. I think they played pretty well in the scrimmage. They had a few turnovers there. I think they just need cohesion. It's going to be difficult for a lot of the XFL teams to come right out of the gate and be clicking on all cylinders. So, but I think Kevin has confidence, although you wouldn't be able to tell by some of the comments.
Well, we'll stick on the offensive side of the ball, and let's talk playmakers. Let's talk receivers. D'Angelo Yancey, Tanner Gentry, looks like they're on IR. How big of a loss is that for the Guardians? And what other receiver standouts have we seen in camp so far and can expect to kind of pick up the slack while they get healthy?
It's difficult to get full information on D'Angelo Yancey and Tanner Gentry. From what I've gotten so far, the word I've gotten so far is that their injuries are not serious or long-term.
Okay.
It might be just a week or two. I mean, that's a positive for New York's offense. They're going to need them. Mikael McKay is a big factor. Obviously, he's
huge.
He's a big-time. He can be a number one on the team, big factor in the red zone, but he can make big plays downfield because of his unbelievable ability to make catches in contested areas. So he may not look like he's open, but he'll go up and get the ball and make the big play. So I think New York's running game is an underrated aspect to the team. I think they have a very talented backfield that a lot of people aren't focusing in on, and I think they might lean on that in the early season if Yancey and Gentry aren't available in week 1.
And Mike, they may be listed on the IR, but you have some information that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to see them throughout this season. We could see them at some point. We just don't know when.
Right, that is correct. I don't know the length of short-term IR in terms of the rosters, but from what I gather, from what I've heard thus far, and these things are always subject to change, but what I've heard is that each roster will have 2 players that are on a short-term IR. And the Guardians right now have to protect themselves in case the Yancey and Gentry are not available in week 1. So that gave an opportunity to 2 other receivers to potentially make the roster and make an impression if those guys aren't healthy. So that's where it stands at the moment. I guess we'll find out more when the league lets us know.
So, Mike, tell us about the defensive side of the ball for the Guardians. What do you see as the strengths for this team? I know the secondary is loaded. I'm a huge Jamar Summers guy. He was one of my favorite defensive players to watch in the AAF. Probably, in my opinion, the best cornerback, him and Keith Reeser in the AAF. So can you talk about just what we can expect defensively and I guess mainly in that secondary for the Guardians?
I think one player that people got to watch out for is LSU's Terrence Alexander.
Nice.
Now he's been playing corner, nickel, and safety there. He's a brilliant kid. A really smart. Ed Orgeron called him the smartest player he's ever been around. Wow. So, and he transferred to LSU just because he still had a year left of eligibility because he wanted to play SEC football. So he transferred there. He wanted to get experience playing there, and the Guardians love him. Chris Dishman, his position coach with the Guardians, loves Terrence Alexander. You've seen recently they traded David Rivers, who was someone who was projected to be a starter with the Guardians. I think a lot of the New York players are not household names, but they will be by season's end. Jamar Summers is a terrific player. He should be in the NFL. If he holds up and plays the way he did in the Alliance, Jamar Summers is going to be in the NFL, especially with the XFL's rules. There's not a scout out there that's not going to see him excel and not going to want to bring him in. So I think there's a lot of good players there. There's Dravon Askew Henry. There's Demetrius Cox. They kept 10 DBs on the roster. They could have kept all 12. That's how good their secondary is. So, and I think it's a strong suit. You're going to see it during the season. It's going to be a big factor. They have more than just Summers. That's people are going to find out when the season starts.
Hey, Mike, talking about defensive backs and staying with the defensive side of the ball, how has Chris Dishman impacted being on the staff there, the defensive backs? What kind do you foresee him really coaching up that unit?
Yeah, I was at camp watching him coach up the defensive backs, and I was really impressed with him. It's easy for a guy like him to influence younger defensive backs when you're two-time All-Pro. You play in a National Football League. So it's he's had a very good impact on those young guys. They're very receptive to listening to him. A lot of the guys in the Guardians secondary have NFL experience, but it's not extensive. So Dishman has been a real tool, a real asset. The Guardians have a really good defensive staff with Jim Herman and others. So they're going to be a good team. They're going to be on that side of the ball. They're not going to have very many problems, in my opinion. We'll see how it goes.
Hey, Mike, so there's been a lot of cuts that have been reported over the last few days, and the XFL, they're going to release their final cut down this Monday. But any of the reported cuts that you've heard so far, is there any that surprise you, not only for the Guardians, but across the XFL?
I was surprised that Tampa released Devin Taylor. He's a very good pass rusher, and he was claimed pretty quickly by the Wildcats. So I was kind of surprised to see pass rushers are difficult to come by. And so, I'm curious of that decision. There were a few big name players, like name recognition players, like Raheem Moore and Terrence Williams and all of that. They kind of surprised me. We're not in these camps, and we don't know how these veterans competed against some of the other younger players. We may look at a roster and see names that we're not familiar with that may have exceeded expectations and that are better than these veterans, quite frankly. So those are just a few that stuck out to me.
Yeah, Mike, I was looking up in Seattle, and I was shocked that they got rid of those receivers in Fred Ross and Roll. I thought those were going to be key pieces on their offense, and they're both gone.
Yeah, that was shocking. Seattle's another team that's going to be very run heavy, and so they have a very deep backfield. They play traditional power sets with tight ends and all that. So, it was surprising. Jalen Roll is somebody who I think should be claimed. He led the NCAA in yards per catch. He's a big play receiver, high character guy. They kept, the interesting guy in that wide receiver pool is Keenan Reynolds. I think that's another guy.
Love Keenan Reynolds.
Yeah, he might factor in as a double forward pass guy. So and he could be in a lot of packages. So it's kind of interesting. They kept Kason Williams and a few others there, and those are good receivers you brought up there, Riley. And I wouldn't be shocked if those guys cycle back into the XFL with other teams.
It's interesting that you bring up Keenan Reynolds because we were talking offline about this, Mike. But just all of the quarterbacks that kind of can be diverse in their skill sets. You look at Quentin Flowers down in Tampa, guys like that, and Keenan Reynolds was a quarterback in college. So what do you make of all these quarterback signings and them not necessarily being looked at as the quarterback, but being used as an asset on the field?
Yeah, it's really like lending itself to like the college game and the wide open kind of like offensive schemes that you see in college. And it's kind of interesting that a lot of the XFL teams are like trying to cater their offenses to their rules. It's, double forward pass and all the importance that there's going to be in red zone offense and executing point after touchdown plays. Yep. Players like Quentin Flowers are going to be very important for that. Eric Dungy, Nick Fitzgerald. You mentioned Keenan Reynolds. So I think you're going to see Marquise Williams in New York factor in a wildcat situation and short yardage situation in the red zone. They might decide whether you win games. The XFL offenses are going to have to be highly efficient in those areas, and the teams that are good at converting extra point tries, for lack of a better term, those teams are going to win games.
Just to kind of follow up on the XFL cut question, Mike, and speaking of Nick Fitzgerald, one of the things that stood out to me, and again, this will come out when the XFL releases it officially on Monday, but what we've seen from sources and what's been leaked, it looks like the Battlehawks have technically 4 quarterbacks, but if you count Nick Fitzgerald out of that, they still carry 3 on a 52-man roster. Was that something that kind of shocked you?
That does shock me. It seems a little excessive to carry 4 quarterbacks during a 10-game season, but I wouldn't completely classify Fitzgerald as a quarterback per se. So they might be using him in a couple different roles, a wide receiver, H-back, tight end. So he's more of a jack of all trades, kind of a gadget player than I would label him as a quarterback. They might list him as a quarterback, but I'm not so sure he's going to get very many snaps there. Still, carrying 4 quarterbacks does seem excessive. One thing I will say, though, is we still got 2 weeks to go till the regular season. So there's always a chance that the roster gets pared down or tweaked before we get there. So maybe they don't keep 4 quarterbacks all the way through.
Hey, Mike, I think I might be reading into this a little bit too much. But a lot of the trades that I've seen across the XFL, it seems for like the same position, whether it's wide receiver for wide receiver, quarterback for quarterback, cornerback for cornerback. And I wonder if it's just more scheme fit, or is there something more to this that you don't see this in very many leagues, just position for the same position and when it comes to trades.
That's a good point. There were a couple of trades that New York made, obviously the Luis Perez trade, but there was one where they picked up 2 offensive linemen from St. Louis where they sent a cornerback in the other direction. But you're right, there has been a lot of position for position trades. I wish I could put a finger on why that is. It's a smaller league. There's probably been maybe off the top of my head, maybe 6, 7 trades at the most. So I don't know how many of those are position for position, but it is a little strange. But I think sometimes when teams get into camp, they look at their position pool and they say, okay, maybe this guy's not a fit. Let's find a wide receiver that fits this role better for us. And so you get a McBride for Ross deal, which was totally a scheme issue. Why that
Mike,
took place.
is your smoke detector going off? Do you need to escape?
So funny. Not at the moment, no.
But it's interesting. It's interesting though that you point that out, because you look at one of the big trades that have happened over the last couple of weeks that we've covered extensively on this show, in Rashad Ross being shipped to DC for Trey McBride. It seems like in terms of scheme, that swap makes sense for both teams, doesn't it?
Oh, no question about it. You've got Trey McBride fits Norm Chow's offense because his offense is a lot of quick release, quick passes, and McBride's more of an underneath player than Rashad Ross is. And Ross fits DC like a glove because they want to throw the football deep and they want to run the football, and they want to get teams out of the box defensively. They don't want them to play 8-man front. So the way you do that is you have a guy who can take the top off the defense, and that's what Rashad Ross does. That's his specialty. That's not to say he can't run any other routes or run slants or any of that stuff, but that's the ultimate value that he brings. So I think both those players are going to be successful, and I think they both landed in the perfect spot.
Yeah. So as we kind of talk about roster starting to take shape, cuts, trades, etc., you wrote an article a couple weeks ago recently about your fantasy football rankings. Who are some of the names that people might not be aware of when it comes to fantasy that's kind of got you excited?
That's a good question. Seattle's backfield is so loaded. I love Jaquan Gardner. Like, I'm tempted. People are going to draft, Kenneth Farrow. They're going to take him high, and rightfully so. And people are going to draft Trey Williams. He's going to be an awesome PPR guy. But the guy who's like a sleeper for me, who I would put on my roster all day, every day, is Jaquan Gardner. Because I just feel like he reminds me so much of Maurice Jones-Drew. Like,
wow, what a comparison!
MJD.
Nice.
Yes.
And he reminds me so much with better breakaway ability. So that's how high he's from. A very small school, Humboldt State. He got injured, unfortunately, in the Alliance of American Football, the San Diego Fleet. Broke some big runs there, and he got injured, but he flashed big time. He was one of the guys who was actually invited to an XFL Summer Showcase while he was still injured. He didn't have to practice or work out. That's how highly the XFL scouting department thought of him. He broke a big run in the live scrimmage using his juke ability, scored a 33-yard run, I believe it was. So he's a guy I really like. As far as wide receivers, anybody on Houston, just draft him. Whether it's
Sammy Coates, man.
Even guys maybe a lot of people are not familiar with. Khalil Lewis, he was taken first by Houston. And June Jones has a history of wide receivers dating back for forever. And if June Jones is picking you first, and that means you're going to be productive. So I'd say Khalil Lewis, Cam Phillips, Sammy Coates, obviously. So anyone else there? It sounds like Jalen Saunders might be a little dinged up, so who knows what happens there. But those are two, the Jaquan Gardner and the Roughnecks receivers. If I could draft all of them, I will.
You know who has me mesmerized, Mike? And it's probably because I'm a big Oronde Gadsden. I'm a Dolphins fan. I know you're a Jets fan, so I was trying not to bring that up. But I was a huge Oronde Gadsden fan. And in terms of a wide receiver, not the greatest, but you knew that dude was going to make some one-handed catches every week. And when I look on social media for the Renegades, Jazz Ferguson has me mesmerized. Now, do you think that's going to translate those one-handed catches into production? Because I am probably the highest guy on Jazz Ferguson right now out of us, at least.
I am so glad you brought him up because, Jeff Badette for the Renegades is going to take the top off the defense. Jazz Ferguson's going to run over the defense. This guy is a gazelle. He's huge, 6'5", 227. I mean, he's a big boy, 4.4 speed. He was actually very productive for Seattle, the Seahawks, in the preseason. A lot of people were shocked that he got released. He just didn't mesh very well with that coaching staff. Ferguson is a lot like Gadsden in that respect. I think he has DK Metcalf ability too. So I would not be shocked. I would not be shocked. Ironically, that was a team he practiced and played with during the summer. I would not be shocked if Jazz Ferguson's top 5 XFL receiver.
Nice. Hey, Mike, I got a quick question for you, man. Who's your favorite uniform? Who's got the best uniform?
I'm partial to the Guardians, but I got to tell you, some of these uniforms are growing on me.
Oh yeah.
like I'm not huge on the Roughnecks road jerseys, but for some reason I like their home jerseys, and I love the helmet. I like the Vipers road unis.
Yeah.
I like that all clean white look. I almost wish the secondary logo was on the helmet and that the fangs.
Yes.
The fangs were on the fangs would look so much cooler on the jersey, because I get the whole concept, like the V, the Viper, and all that. It would look cooler if they were on the jersey or the pants, and if the actual secondary logo was on the helmet. Yeah, Guardians all day, every day for me. So that's my preference. But I also like the Defenders. I think my opinion is I think the XFL hit a home run with the uniforms. So that's uniforms, especially the helmets. I like pretty much all the helmets in the league.
I think we're going to wrap up with this one because you were talking about how they hit a home run with the uniforms. I know you wrote an article about the rules a couple of weeks back. So I'm interested to get your take on the rules because, in my opinion, I think they hit a home run with the rules. There were some rules they were testing in the spring league that I was pretty skeptical of. Like, for example, the 2-point stance. I was not a fan. So glad they didn't go that route. But for you, what is a rule or two that stands out to you in terms of something that you're excited to see and is really going to, I guess, reimagine the game, as the XFL likes to say?
Yeah, I'm not mourning the death of the extra point kick, so I'm not going to have a funeral for it. So
I agree with you, Mike. I agree.
I love it sounds radical, but I love the 3-point conversion.
Yeah.
First off, it's going to be low percentage to begin with, but it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun when teams attempt it.
I'm fascinated, Mike. I'm fascinated of the strategy that's going to be involved with it. I have no idea
You're going to have
what
to
to
earn
expect.
it. You're going to have to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Riley. You're going to have to earn the 3-point conversion. That's not an easy play. You know, if you look at the percentage of teams that are able to convert from 10 yards out in the red zone, it's very low. I mean,
well, that's
teams
what I
barely
mean.
convert from.
When it comes to strategy, Mike, and you're a coach on the sideline, is there going to be a trend? Like, are we going to kind of, you know, at first nobody knows what the other guy's doing, but then there's going to be a trend developing? Like, is it typical for a team to go for 1, 2, or 3? Because right now we've never seen 3 options after a touchdown.
Right.
So it's like coaches don't even know how to approach it. Like, what is the highest percentage? I'm sure a lot of analytics are going to go into it once we get like.
You know, I heard Oliver Luck in an interview. I thought it was pretty funny. He said one of the defensive coaches has already told him that automatically, if they score a defensive touchdown, they're going for 3 every time.
Yeah, I love that.
That's cool.
They want to just go for the throat. And when I heard that,
that's June Jones. We're calling it right now.
Yeah, or it could be June. But when I heard that, I kept hearing Winston Moss's voice. It sounded like something Winston Moss would say, like, "Hey, we're gonna, if we score a defensive touchdown, we're going for 3. We're gonna put them out of their misery." So I think that the 3-point conversion is my favorite part. I also like the safety aspect of the kickoff. Eliminating those full speed collisions, I think, is very cool. I think it's the smart play. The kickoff is dead in the NFL. It's a boring play. It's a nothing play. So I think that's cool. But the conversions is my favorite part. You know, the teams, I think that's my favorite part of the rules and the strategy that it's going to be involved. If you're up, if you're down, what point you go for, what you do. I think I love it. I love it.
So you can follow him on Twitter, Mike Mitchell. He's at XFL Writer, Mike Mitchell. So XFL Writer. Check him out. In my opinion, there's nobody better that's covering the XFL right now, Mike. We appreciate you coming on and spending time with us. We need to make this a regular occurrence, in my opinion. So I'm saying it live to put the pressure on you. You have to join us on a regular basis, okay, throughout the season.
Well, I'm super flattered. You guys are doing an awesome job, and people are taking notice. And really glad you're on board. I just got to ask you guys. Are you original AAF fans who came on board late, or are you on board with the XFL concept from day one?
All right. Well, I'll admit I was an AAF fan.
I watched all AAF games. I'm not saying that in a negative fashion.
But Mike, let me tell you though, Mike. It's not that I wasn't going to be an XFL fan. Glessner and I were sitting at a bar in the mountains of Virginia, a brewery actually, Devil's Backbone. We were enjoying a nice brown ale. And I look up on the TV and I'm like, what the hell is this? I hadn't heard nothing, not a single thing about the Alliance of American Football until we were sitting there and it was week 1 on CBS. Yep. And then I really got into it because I'm all for alternative leagues. So the fact that the XFL, obviously I'm doing a show on the XFL now, so I know tons about it. But just the publicity that the league has gotten leading up to this season, they're in totally separate ballparks. It's not even close.
Yeah,
but
no
I will admit, I
just the
was
way
a
it's
fan
finished.
of the AAF.
There you go.
I was a fan of the Alliance too, but I've just noticed recently, like a lot of AAF loyalists have come out of the woodwork. People that I remember.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of remember vividly talking crap about the XFL and saying that it was ridiculous and the AAF was the NFL's league and all that.
No.
And so, and then as soon as the AAF, went under, which sucked.
Yeah.
But as soon as it went under, all of a sudden, hey, maybe I'll give this league a try.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
I'll say that I'm a big college football fan. I think all four of us are.
Yeah.
And what really stood out to the XFL is just the amount of college talent that we watched in college at big schools, Big 12, SEC, ACC, and I'm a big University of Washington fan. There's a bunch of former Huskies that are playing all across the league. So for me, it's exciting, and that's why I really got on board early. The AAF, I guess, just from a marketability standpoint, didn't really stand out. I watched probably about 4 or 5 games, but I'm not really a loyalist by any means, but I was really excited when they brought on Oliver Luck. That for me, that was kind of the turning point.
Right, and that was big, getting Oliver Luck. I'll say this, though, Bless. It's a college football fan's dream right now.
Yes.
With Bob Stoops and Hal Mumme.
Oh, exactly.
That's like a
Yeah.
match made in heaven. I never thought that could be possible.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen in Dallas. I mean, that's just like the greatest thing ever.
That's right.
Yeah, for me, I wasn't necessarily a huge AAF guy. What got me excited for the AAF was John Wolford, just because I'm a homer and that's my guy. But honestly, what turned me off about the AAF was I saw guys like Trent Richardson and Keith Price and guys like that, and I just was like, man, those weren't quality guys in my opinion. I didn't want to see those guys play again, and for me, the XFL has done a lot better job of bringing in guys I want to see, bringing in guys who were really good in college, who were, maybe lesser known to the public eye, but were actually studs and really put up good numbers in college. And so, like Gless said, big college football fan, and the XFL's just hit every button that they could hit for me to like it.
Good take.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, honestly, I wanted to like the AAF. I watched the first 3 or 4 weeks of it, but then I found the product to be a little bit lackluster. Like, it just wasn't as fun as I thought it'd be to play. And I think to Kenny's point, it was because like Trent Richardson was out there every time, but
averaging 3 yards a carry.
But I think I do like the XFL even more because of what Glessner was saying, kind of bringing back those college offensive schemes. And I think it's gonna be a lot more exciting to watch the XFL than the AAF.
Yep.
I agree.
But I think Glessner made the biggest point is when the XFL brought on Oliver Luck. We actually did a segment. It was one of our first segments as a show, the Luck Factor, and nobody knows about it. So if you're watching this, go back and watch it.
Go watch it.
We were so pumped about it, and it didn't do very well in terms of views. So go back and watch that. But I think the second that Vincent McMahon hired Oliver Luck is when we all were like, okay, this is the real deal. This is something that we need to be watching out for. So
He's like an adult in the room.
He's the perfect president for this type of league because here's a guy who is NFL Europe president, so he knows exactly what it's like to be, these type of secondary football league, how to run it and all that. And obviously he's had a lot of success in other different places, West Virginia, etc. So that hire was, the first big positive sign that maybe the XFL is really onto something. So we'll see how it goes, but so far so good.
I'm not sure you can do much better with your first few hires than Oliver Luck and then Bob Stoops. So they were off to a good start already. So the momentum is growing. But we really appreciate you joining us, Mike. It's at XFL Writer on Twitter. Like I said, you're a regular, Mike. I'm reeling you in. You have no option on this, okay?
All right. Sounds
all right,
good.
so
Thank you.
Check his stuff out at XFL Board and XFL News Hub. Mike Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us here on XFL Chalk Talk.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
What's up, football fans? This is Riley from XFL Chalk Talk. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date on all things XFL and interact with us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at XFL Chalk Talk.